Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is John, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And I am Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
Today, we'll be discussing episode 4 of the show, titled Monster Swamp. While we'll not be spoiling any of the comic, and by extension, any future plot lines of the show, we will be discussing the details of this specific episode in the series through episode 4. So pause this and go watch the show before you listen to the rest of the episode. You can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast.com. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show, share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher to our podcast. 2 housekeeping things at the moment on g2tpodcast.com. There are now links to 2 other pages if you're visiting via desktop, or in the menu if you're on mobile. Click on Dylan Face to see what we mean when we talk about Dylan Face. And click on questions to keep up with the questions the show has made us ask, as well as any answers that may have been provided up to this point. We got some more feedback from Bruce. Just wanted to, and this is Bruce's feedback now. Just wanted to say thanks to the shout out. And yes, I did mean Talking Preacher. I blame AMC for having too many talk shows at this point. My feedback here is pretty minimal on this one. I'm still a little annoyed with the Tulip story since they've had multiple opportunities to tell us a bit more, but they just aren't taking them. I did like the early bird cameo by quote unquote spoiler bald man in white suit. Also, hate to be that guy who corrects people on the internet, but I remember Donnie's last name being mentioned as Schneck. Shank.
Yeah.
Probably misspelled that in the pilot, so he wouldn't be Kincannon's son. Anyways, keep up the good work, Bruce. P.S. I figured I'd mention this since my podcast came up. I actually have 2 unproduced Preacher movie scripts that will be on an episode down the line, one of which was written by Garth Ennis.
Oh, whoa.
Pretty cool.
That is cool.
So yeah, that's that. Just a quick, more in-depth discussion of who I am. I'm John. I'm from the Midwest Game Nerds podcast. Introducing myself. Alex is out of town. I'm filling in. Nick has graciously joined me as well. So we're excited to talk about this episode. What's it called again? Monster
Swamp.
Yeah. All right. So in the teaser, it opens with the Anvil Hotel with Linus in the school bus driving past. Tulip's Uncle Walter's passed out on the side of the road, and one of the girls in her underwear being chased, and a bunch of the other girls in their underwear being hunted down as well. And it appears that Clive from Kincannon Meat and Power catches up and shoots the girl in her underwear. Lacey's her name. We find out it's Lacey with a paintball of some sort, and she falls into a sinkhole. So we have this appearance of sinkholes.
Yes.
What do you know about those sinkholes, Nick?
Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't think I do, but maybe I do, and I just don't remember. But I thought that opening was really cool. I thought it was super... really, really very moody. It felt like an old exploitation movie. It was kind of had that Planet Terror vibe to it. Where
yeah,
it was
totally.
Very over the top with like the colors and the smoke and just the scantily clad women running through fields being chased by men with headlamps on. It was really interesting, and I was like, whoa, where is this coming from and where's it going? And the end result was not what I expected.
No, it kind of caught me off guard. I was thinking these girls are actually being hunted. You know, the whorehouse. What's it? Toad something.
Yeah,
I can't remember it now. This is my first foray into these TV show podcasts. So
it's all right.
My retention and recollection is awful. Just so you know, this is part of the reason I don't read books, and people are probably going to make fun of me for that. So
that's all good. At least you got your notes.
Yeah.
I thought I was actually watching the wrong show for a second. Like it started, and I was like, did I accidentally click on a Walking Dead episode or something? Because it was so different, but it was cool. It was an interesting beginning.
Yeah, I definitely
really
dug that.
Continues to set the tone for exactly the kind of rabble that work for Kincannon.
Right.
Which is interesting. It's funny because everybody in this episode says Kincannon so much, and I've always said it Quincannon, and I'm sure Alex and I both, for the first 3 episodes of this podcast, were probably saying Quincannon.
Yeah.
And now they're all saying Kincannon, and I'm like, oh, all right. I get that. It's probably correct.
I
definitely
think
a more interesting pronunciation.
In my notes, I spelled it wrong through the whole thing, and then I had to go back and like rewrite his name because I couldn't remember. Like I don't even remember what I was calling him at the time. But then I had to go back through all my notes and like rewrite it so I knew I would pronounce it properly.
It's funny. As soon as you were about to when you were reading the introduction, I was just quickly scanning the IMDb page for this episode, and I saw Donnie Shank, and I was like, "Oh shit, we got the wrong name." And I'm glad Bruce was on the ball with that.
Somebody has to be.
Yeah,
as hard as we may try to be.
Eventually,
right?
Just not right away. But
all
good
right.
call, Bruce. Please let us know what goofs we have in this episode.
Yeah, anytime we screw up, we're happy to be called out. So moving on to Act 1 here, which opens with a flashback sequence of young Jesse preparing the church for Mass. Jesse's father, who I realized plays Meacham in House of Cards. I thought that was kind of cool. Like the same character. They're all not
I
same character.
Watched House of Cards.
Oh, well, the actor that plays Meacham on House of Cards is the actor playing Jesse's father. So anyways, Jesse's father begins Mass to a packed house. The mysterious cowboy played by Graham McTavish is seen in attendance. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Oh, I totally didn't.
Yeah, they just a quick spot of him sitting in the audience there.
Let that be a lesson to me for stopping to glance on my phone for even a minute during anything, because as you blink and you miss it. Ugh.
And that's yeah. Well, I'll talk a little more at the end.
Totally gonna go back and watch it again.
Right. So that happens, and then it flips to present day, and Cassidy is explaining how he chopped up Fiore and DeBlanc and buried them after they tried to attack Jesse with a chainsaw, and Jesse shrugs him off. And I don't know if you want to discuss this at this point, but I have 2 other bullet points for this act. I'm not sure.
Yeah, just bang them out.
Sure. Okay, so the scene changes to Lacey being pulled up from the sinkhole, and Kincannon is telling his men to watch their rough housing and tells all the ladies from the whorehouse they need to watch where they're walking in the middle of the night. Yeah. And then he just walks off, and that's his whole little press conference for them. And Tulip is standing by watching as Clive and his friends giggle about the dead hooker, and she's just kind of like, "What the hell's your guys' problem?" You know. And Jesse goes to visit Emily and asks about church attendance, wondering how the numbers have gone up. And he asks about maybe holding a raffle. And she changes the subject to asking him about how he was seen breaking into Linus's house one night. And the next day, Linus is seen with his face all bandaged up. She states that she thought the church was doing all right and expresses the fact that she worries about Jesse. Jesse tells her not to worry and says that he's going to do something wonderful to help the church fill up every Sunday. So that was Act 1.
Yeah, I really...
Did I spit that all out a little too quick?
I think it was all right, That's why we can listen back.
Right, exactly.
The cowboy, that's crazy. I can't believe I missed that.
I could be wrong. And I watched it twice. I'm pretty damn sure.
Yeah, but you could be very right.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me. It's kind of cool.
I think I'm like 95% correct that it was him sitting there, and there was a pretty clear shot of his face.
Gotcha. I'm totally gonna look back, and because I would know Graham McTavish's face anywhere, so I'm gonna check that out. But the scene where Cassie's explaining everything to Jesse is so funny, like telling him exactly what's happened, and that he thought these guys were after him, so he killed them, and it's just my problem. I'll take care of it. The whole thing was really funny because Jesse's just so focused on trying to figure out what to do with his power that he's just or his missions that he thinks he has, and he's just totally. Everything's flying by him, and he's just not even paying attention.
Doesn't even care.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It was a funny scene, though. It just reminded me. It was almost like kind of felt like an old comedy duo kind of moment where one's just speaking rapid fire, and the other one's just going, and it's like these crazy, outrageous things. And it was all done in like one long take throughout the church, which is pretty cool. Helped kind of amplify the just ridiculousness of Jesse just tuning all this out and going, oh, yeah, vampire hunters, you said? Yeah, whatever. That was good. What was the bullet before that?
The bullet before that was discussing the flashback of young. Oh no, hold on, that's wrong. Explaining how that the bullet before that was the sequence of Jesse preparing the church for Mass.
Oh, okay.
Helping his dad, and then his dad. His dad is literally giving Mass to a packed house. Every seat's full.
That was really cool. Yeah, that was an interesting.
Shows the impact of his father on the community. Mm-hmm. Like obviously, like his dad was a big deal, and it kind of lends to his character a little bit, showing that he's not his father. He clearly has shifted from that and needs to step up his game to be at the same level as dad.
And also just how times have changed. I think too.
Sure.
People used to just show up for church, and now they're even the crowd in the pilot was so shrimpy, and Tulip and Cassidy were even there trying to pad it up a little. The scene of Lacey getting pulled out was pretty insane. I was like, wow, this is Kincaid on his little box, standing up with
That was really funny.
it was
And
hilarious.
It's his wife was the other
with
woman,
his
right?
weird little
She's like,
weird little speaker and
Yep.
microphone. Oh, yeah, that was great. I don't even know how they dig up half the props and ideas they have in this show, but they're really good. Like,
I
really
don't know
unique.
if you saw my message in the group chat, but his Kincannon should have. I think they were trying to cast John Malkovich as him because that guy reminds me so much of John Malkovich.
Oh no, he's Jackie Earle Haley is perfect.
I think he's awesome in the role, but I feel he gives me this John Malkovich vibe. Yeah, and like I totally.
Kincannon in the comic is a very diminutive man. Just like that. He's very small and slender and bald, and like it's spot on. But that is funny. He does kind of have a Malkovich. Malkovichian
yeah, and like
delivery.
His demeanor and his delivery is very much like Malkovich.
Yeah, he's pretty disconnected from everything in this show.
Right.
It's really funny all the weird things he's doing to fill his time. He just seems totally unengaged with the world. It's really unsettling. But he's good. But the shot of Lacey, and I presume it was intentional, of her hanging from the chain as they're hosing her off, reminded me a lot of the shot of the cowboy when he's walking through or to the town Ratwater, I think it was called.
Yeah, and then
there
see
were
all
people
the
hanging from the trees. It kind of reminded me of that.
All the scalped Indians.
There's kind of a similar. It could be a coincidence, but it felt kind of intentional. I guess we'll see if that ever ends up somehow being related.
Right on. Okay. Act 2 opens with another flashback now of young Jesse and Tulip smoking, and Jesse's dad pulls him aside and begins lecturing him about being an example to look up to, and then starts whipping him with a belt in front of the other kids, setting that example. Flips to present day. Cassidy's in a hotel with Fiore and DeBlanc, asking what their plan is for Jesse. They explain they're going to cut open Jesse and scoop out what's inside of him, put it in a coffee can, and take it home. And Cassidy affirms that the two men are from heaven and proceeds to negotiate with them as to what his payment is for helping them with Jesse. He takes some cash from DeBlanc's wallet and then leaves. And Fiore says he doesn't trust Cassidy and suggests that they let someone know what's going on. DeBlanc infers that it's not a good idea to let anyone know why they're quote-unquote down here. And the scene switches to Cassidy doing drugs with the hooker and ends. And then the next scene, it switches to Kincannon sitting at his desk playing Q*bert, which I found hilarious as a game nerd. And the mayor shows up for a meeting to discuss the sinkholes. Kincannon calls out the mayor for meeting with a sustainability organization called the Green Acre Group in Austin. And the mayor says they've been reaching out to Kincannon and that it'll be a good partnership. And Kincannon tells the mayor a story about his grandfather taking care of another group that was trying to take over their business and that no one said a word about him doing so. And then he proceeds to piss in the mayor's open briefcase. End scene.
Yeah. What a punctuation mark on the end of that
I
scene.
know. That was a little... I don't know. I'd be so angry if somebody pissed in my briefcase.
Yeah, and what's weird, I mean, a little bit later in the episode, there's a similar conversation about it, and the mayor doesn't really seem too offended by it. He's more just annoyed. He's kind of like, oh man, and Kincannon's like, don't look at me. He just takes a leak in his case. It's so weird. What's interesting about Cassidy talking to Fiore and DeBlanc is he doesn't really seem to believe them, which is kind of funny considering it's very reflective of the way he talks to Jesse and is like, yeah, I'm a vampire. And Jesse's like...
Just shrugs him off.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, yeah, whatever. That's funny. And it's funny because Cassidy, being this obviously extraordinary being, he kind of is just dismissive of them. And I don't know whether he doesn't believe them or not, or if he just doesn't care. He's kind of like, here's two weirdos with a wallet full of cash. I'm just gonna take it and see what happens. Pretty entertaining. Yeah. That scene actually, the shot of Cassidy with all the drugs and the hooker is really funny because the music was so good, and it made me realize that the music they've had, all the source music they've had throughout this whole series, is just perfectly selected. And it reminds me of Eastbound and Down. Have you ever watched that?
Oh yeah, totally.
The way the music in that show, every song is absolutely feels like it was tailor made for whatever scene they're doing. Like they just curate the most perfect music for that show, and this show feels a lot like kind of the same thing. They pick just the best songs, even if it's only this 15-second shot. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I wonder which of the two or three people who are the main writers. It's Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, and then there's one other guy I can't remember.
Sam Catlin.
Yeah, I wonder which of the three of them is the music nerd that's getting that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because one of them's back there.
Or they just have a great music supervisor that's just picking out these tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, not much to say about that one, I guess. Bear with me, everyone. I'm new at this.
I'm really curious about the interaction between Cassidy and the two men. How that's going to continue to play out, because they're so strange, and it's really funny because he's killed them twice now, and he's just kind of like, yeah, I'll just keep dealing with these guys. Like, he doesn't really seem too phased by it. And he's like, well, I'm sure in his mind, he's like, I tried to tell Jesse and he just wouldn't listen, so I did my job. I'm just gonna take these guys' money, and then, we'll take it from there.
See what else he can milk out of them.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Just see where it goes.
Right on. All right. And the next scene, Act 3, opens with Fiore and DeBlanc in the hotel, and their otherworldly phone begins to ring, or it appears to be ringing, and DeBlanc tells Fiore not to answer it, and Fiore reaches for the hotel phone and picks it up because the two phones are like right next to each other, and it's someone from the front desk asking if they're checking out anytime soon, and Fiore tells them they'll be checking out.
That was funny. He said very soon.
Very soon, which is exactly what Cassidy said
yeah.
when he left. Is either they asked him, when will you be back? And he goes, very soon.
God, that guy is so funny. The guy they cast, the real tall guy, because he just is just so bizarre.
Yeah, he has this very awkward demeanor.
Yeah, he's so weird. When he's like, when will you bring him? Soon. And he just walks right up to him. Be more specific. Very soon. Yeah. And you could tell, like, he's like clearly the oddball who seems like he's kind of calibrating himself to how humans behave.
Right.
Like, he just hears something and it's kind of like, I'm going to use that. Whereas the other guy seems a little bit more quicker on the uptake.
Down to earth.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Up top. There you go. The podcast is now renamed Down to Earth.
Yeah.
Gone to Texas, down to earth / No, that's that was funny. And then the shot immediately after that of him staring into that vending machine, because he just goes to the front desk.
Yeah, because he saw the commercial for the big as Texas burger, which I kept thinking they actually said big ass Texas burger. And he goes to the front desk and he asks the guy for the big ass Texas burger, and the guy's like, "We don't have a restaurant or room service, but we have a vending machine." And then he's just staring blank at a vending machine like he has no idea what the hell to do with it.
Oh, it was great.
So
and
good.
Something about that shot again reminded me of Eastbound and Down. Like, there's these throughout some of the episodes of that show, they have these weird little shots that are somehow really beautiful, but they're like totally meaningless or just stupid.
Well, it had this sharp contrast of color. You've got like the super blues and greens coming out of the vending machine. You've got these really deep, rich oranges and yellows in the background. So there's this like, this very like ethereal feel going on with it. It's glowing on him, and it's got this slow like zoom going in. And, yeah, it was just well done.
It's becoming more and more apparent that they're not from Earth or from anywhere that's familiar, because when you initially meet them, you think they're like rangers or something, and now I had this realization when he goes to leave the room and he says he's hungry and he just picks up his 10-gallon hat and puts it on. I'm like, he has no idea what to do with that. He just sees other people wearing it and he's like, this is what people around here wear. Yep. I will put it on my head too. It's really funny. He just stands there like such a weirdo in front of the vending machine.
Yeah,
that's great.
And then the scene changes to the mayor sitting at Emily's house, and she's coming in the door with the TV for the raffle. She offers to pay him for babysitting the kids, and he tells her not to bother. It's the least he can do because she's so helpful with the community and everything. And the scene switches to the two of them, sitting, chatting at the table. This is when the mayor is telling her about how some other townsperson defecated on his driveway and
helped him clean it up.
The guy was apologizing the whole time while doing it because he was so conflicted over what he was doing. And then Emily and the mayor are getting down, which I didn't see that coming, but
it was a really funny kind of reveal, because she says like, I'm never going to be with you.
Right, exactly.
And then he goes, yeah, I know, you tell me all the time. And
then she promptly takes her pants off.
Yeah, I assumed she meant that in like a sexual way, but I guess she must mean just they'll never have a relationship. They'll never like,
it's never going to be more than just sex.
She won't marry him. But yeah, that was pretty funny how then he, she says, don't let the kids almost caught you last time.
Right.
You got to be out here by morning. And then he just puts the wine glasses in the sink and kind of starts to clean up and like plays husband for just a brief second before going in there. It was really interesting.
And then after that, the scene switches to the brothel, and the girls are standing around having a memorial service of some sort for Lacey. Tulip begins to lose her shit over what happened to Lacey and gets talked down to by Clive, who says no one wants to hear her bullshit. Mosey stops the situation from escalating and tells all the girls and Kincannon men that in honor of Lacey, the next hour's on the house. And then we learn that Tulip's mother was one of the Toadvine girls. Toadvine, that's it. I wrote it down. The Toadvine whorehouse. So Tulip's mom was one of the whores, brothel women of the night.
The women folk.
Yeah. And let's see, where did I leave off of my notes here? And she hears loud music start playing upstairs, and she runs up and, just starts beating the hell out of Cassidy, thinking that he's Clive. Cassidy falls out of the window and is bleeding from his neck with a giant piece of glass hanging out of it. And the scene switches to Tulip holding Cassidy in a car as one of the other girls is driving them to a hospital. And at the hospital, Cassidy runs off as Tulip's trying to get him a doctor. She finds him in a room drinking blood from blood packs, and he looks up and says, "You were right, love. I think I'm going to make it." Which, Cassidy, I think, is my favorite character. Like, I don't know if, I'm never going to take him serious, even when he is serious. And I think that's probably the same way Jesse feels about him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's being cast on us as viewers as well. So
Cassidy's really interesting because he comes off as very dumb, but he's not dumb. And sometimes he comes off as though he doesn't care. But that's not true either. And he's a very three-dimensional or four-dimensional even character. Like, there's a lot to him, and he's got a lot more complexity than what's on the surface. And it's kind of interesting because most of the characters in the series by this point you kind of have figured out. But Cassidy, you think you do, but do you really think you do? Like, if you think you do, that's fine. But I think that it seems like even just what's laid out in the show is that there's a lot more to him than what's being led on. And we still don't really know what he's about, what he's after.
Have they alluded to how old he is as a vampire yet?
He said he was 119 I think in the pilot or the second episode when he and Jesse are just getting drunk.
I thought so. And
he tells them straight up, he's like, "I'm a 119-year-old vampire from the city of Dublin."
Right.
And Jesse just laughs and is like, "Yeah, sure you are." And
oh, I like it.
It is kind of funny that Jesse doesn't bother to question when he runs outside in like a little hat, like a rice paddy hat, and all wrapped up in like a big blanket. It's really funny, Jesse.
Oh, and he was smoking fiberglass insulation out of the apple pipe that he had. Because he basically is willing to ingest anything and everything to get just screwed up.
Exactly.
Get a high, feel something. I think is. That's pretty important. I mean, I think to remember about Cassidy is that he's we are seeing shades of that he's a very kind of lonely guy who doesn't really have much going for him, doesn't really feel much of anything, like you said. And it's really interesting still that he's hanging around in Annville. Right.
They haven't really, in the series anyway, said too much of why he's sticking around, other than that he really does feel a genuine friendship with Jesse. I didn't realize wholly until this moment in this episode that he and Tulip had not actually met yet. They've been in the same space. They'd been in the church together, but they haven't ever actually been introduced or anything. It's just kind of interesting.
Until she kicks the shit out of him.
Yes, yeah. And then kisses him in the backseat of the car. And then that moment was funny. And it was pretty interesting. I think that in regards to what Bruce said, I think we got a little bit more about Tulip in the previous episode. We actually got a lot more about her, and that was really, I think, satisfying for both myself and Alex, and that felt like a step in the right direction because she's so interesting. And this episode felt like a little bit of a backslide. Once again, she felt like kind of a one note, just like, that girl died and that's wrong, and there wasn't really much more to it. But I think we do, learning about her mom and how she and Jesse have known each other since they were little kids is pretty interesting, and that Jesse's dad probably thought she was from the wrong side of the tracks, smoking cigs outside the church type thing. Yeah, she's a good character.
No, I like her a lot. I like her and Cassidy are definitely my favorites. I think the little girl they cast as her as a kid is really fitting too. She looked just like her. So
yeah, I looked at the little kid who plays Jesse as a kid, and I was like, how do you cast young Dominic? Dominic Cooper's so distinct looking. He just has this look. And I was listening to I started listening to the AMC's Preacher Insider podcast, and it's really good. It's really, really cool. And like Alex suggested in the previous episode, it really did provide a lot of cool insight into the series, which I was really just jonesing for. And it made me even more excited for it. It made me want to watch it even more. But they spend 4 minutes talking about Dominic Cooper's hair, and it's so funny. And they
Well,
talk
I
about,
noticed like through the episode, his hair gradually gets bigger.
it just kind of does, yeah, crazy shit.
It's got a life of its own.
Which is, yeah, and that's exactly what they say. They say there's no controlling it, and they said that they tried making it more like it is in the comics. Because in the comic, he has this weird, like almost like a Jerry curl hair. It's
like
really
weird,
strange,
puffy looking.
Yes,
like,
yeah, and it's almost like Dylan hair. If Dylan hair was a thing, Dylan face is fact. It is.
We're gonna have to make another page called Dylan Hair.
It is pretty much what I would say is Dylan hair, but it's a very distinct look, and they said they actually tried like throughout the wardrobe and makeup process to get it like that, and they were like there was just no doing it.
Yeah,
and I'm really glad they didn't, because I don't think it would have translated well.
Right,
and I think his hair in the show is really funny and like interesting and distinct, because
it's a character in itself.
Well, yeah, like our logo for the show has just his silhouette, and the hair is totally like a highlight of it. But they talk about
those were the two. So disclaimer to the crowd listening. I made the logo for the show.
Yes,
and the two things I wanted to focus on were A, the hair, and B, the preacher collar. And even with as small as that logo is, you can still see that preacher collar. So
his wardrobe is spot on from the comics.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's so good. But the hair is hilarious. And I think it's Evan Goldberg says, he's talking about just how phenomenal his hair is, and he goes, "You could stick a fork in it, and it would just bend like it's just the thickest hair." It's really funny, but the show is actually really, really great. They get really in depth about a lot of stuff, and
that's awesome.
I really, really like it. So anyway, that's a little segue about Jesse's hair.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that or listen to that podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, so that was Act 3. Act 4 now opens with a flashback. Young Jesse being woken up by his father, who says they have to go. They walk down a hall, and Jesse's dad tells him to wait as he steps into Odin Kincannon's office. Jesse steals the ashtray that's resting on the end table next to him, and you hear some muffled shouting as Jesse's dad leaves the office, and you hear Odin yell, "Denounce him!" And as Jesse gets up, he peers into the office and continues walking. They don't actually show us what's going on in the office or what he sees, but obviously something's going on because the music intensifies. There's some...
And he looked pretty
little
freaked out.
Yeah, a little
by what
like,
he saw.
what?
Yeah, so I'm really curious. I mean, I think based on established knowledge, I kind of think I might know what was going on in there, but it's definitely pretty horrifying. They did the good thing where they don't show you right away; they just show the reaction. And I was talking about that in I think the pilot episode, that they did that with the two little kids in the tornado shelter while Tulip is shooting at a helicopter. They don't show anything.
That was one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, they just show the reactions, and that's so often the temptation to really show the thing is huge, but to just show reactions is generally more powerful. And that moment was pretty freaky. I was like, oh god, this is really...
Yeah.
And he has that ashtray earlier in the episode. He's using the same ashtray when he's sitting in the window.
I didn't notice that.
After he has the first flashback about his dad, he's sitting in the window
smoking a cigarette.
He's smoking, and he uses that same. So he's still hanging on to that ashtray.
Right.
So I think that there's some underlying existing relationship with Kincannon that I think Jesse's hanging on to a little bit.
And yeah, totally. I didn't even notice that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again.
I'm 99% sure.
I believe you. I totally.
I noticed. I mean, I noticed it when he ashed his cigarette in it, because I was like, that's an interesting looking ashtray. And
right.
then he swipes it later, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is the same one.
Yep. And then on the ride home, Jesse's dad says to him, "Some people just can't be saved." And then Jesse tucks the ashtray further into his pocket. The scene flips to present day. Jesse's sitting with Kincannon as he paints figurines for the display of the Alamo that he's working on. Jesse asks Kincannon to come to church tomorrow as a leader of the community, and Kincannon turns him down. In an effort to persuade him, Jesse brings up his old age, and a discussion of what comes after death comes up. Kincannon says nothing. Jesse asks, "What if we're held to account for our actions?" And Kincannon goes through a series of what ifs, and Jesse then asks if he's afraid of death, to which Kincannon replies, "Nope, seems to me you are, preacher." Jesse says he can make Odin go to church, and Odin says that wouldn't be very Christian. And then Jesse uses his dad's land as incentive to get Odin to come to church, because he realizes that Kincannon really wants that land and always has wanted it, but Jesse's dad wouldn't give it up. And he says to Odin, if you don't leave the sermon as a Christian, then the land is yours. And then it clips to commercial.
Yeah, that was a good scene. It went by. It was interesting to me that it took up essentially a whole act of the show, and it was very. It wasn't really intense in like a scary way, but it was intense in a way of like you have two very strong personalities and right next to each other, and just both kind of talking about the same thing, but not.
Right.
I really liked. I mean, Jackie Earle Haley is obviously he's an awesome actor, but he's able to do so much with so little in this scene in particular. Like just the raises of his eyebrows and the way he even scoffs at Jesse is just very, very good. Just very dismissive. It's really awesome. And the fact that he's putting together a replica of the Alamo, or like a model of the Alamo, and he and Jesse are deliberating where Jim Bowie died is really funny. As good Texans, you'd think they would both know, but now they've made me go, where did he die? And how does anyone really know? It's kind of cool.
I mean, I forgot about the Alamo.
Yeah, you're supposed to remember the Alamo.
I know. I'm a horrible American.
How do you forget about the Alamo? I think the last trade of Preacher is actually called the Alamo or the Alamo. Somehow it revolves around the Alamo, like the name of the final book.
Yeah,
but yeah, that was interesting. That was cool.
The whole scene to me kind of played out like a little bit of a struggle of power in a way. You know, like you have Kincannon, who's like clearly a big, force within the community, and you have Jesse, who's like struggling to like become a bigger part of the community, and he realizes he kind of needs Kincannon to do that.
Yeah, and Jesse's very focused now, which is cool. He's in the first few episodes we see him, he's a little bit of a mess, and even when he's not drunk or just kind of wallowing, he's just kind of aimless and detached. And now he's very hyper focused on what's going on.
He has a purpose.
He does.
At least he thinks he does, and he's got to figure it out. He thinks he knows what his purpose is, but he's not sure. But he thinks it involves Kincannon and using him to his advantage.
Yeah. No, it was a good scene for sure. I like something about the Alamo. As for the fact that they're working on that is really interesting.
Yeah. I only think of Pee-wee's Big Adventure when I think of the Alamo. That's the only thing that pops up in my head. Do you remember anything? I remember the Alamo. So, and then we switch to the final act here, which opens with a packed house at the church, and Jesse begins thanking everyone for coming and starts talking about how the world is turning to shit and explaining that everyone's turned their back on the church because they don't see what good it's going to do to show up to Mass. And Jesse tells everyone that they're sinners, and he's going to bring them back, starting with one man. And as he lays his hand on Odin's shoulder, he asks Odin if he's going to serve God. And Kincannon says no, and begins to get up to leave, telling Jesse that he has lost. You didn't win, Jesse. Like, I'm going to take your land, basically. Jesse places his hand on Odin's shoulder and speaks with his otherworldly voice, telling Odin to serve God. And then he asks him, "Will you serve God?" And he says, "Of course. Yes, of course I will."
He keeps repeating it.
He says it a few times. And then the scene flips to Fiore eating some Cheetos. He finally figured out what he wanted from that vending machine, and he picked Cheetos, which makes me really like him as a character because I would have made the same choice. Like, everything else in that machine looked really plain, and I was like, Cheetos for sure.
Cheetos pop.
Yeah.
I was expecting to see him just going ham on his fingers,
like licking all the cheese. Orange shit off of it. Yeah. Totally, man. And then so he's eating some Cheetos, and then a phone starts ringing in the hotel, and it turns out it's the otherworldly phone that's ringing, and fades to black, and that's the end.
With some more really awesome music.
Yep. Very well placed music for sure.
It's funny because the phone, that phone must be for the most dire of emergency. That must be the president's red phone, because you would think they would know what it sounds like.
Right.
And it's cool how they play the gag where he hears it ringing, he absentmindedly just grabs the hotel phone, and then the ringing continues, and it turns out it's the other phone.
Right.
And I think that kind of sets up the stakes that they don't even know what this thing sounds like for sure, so it must be that important of a line. That's pretty cool. The Kincannon in church was really funny. The moment when Jesse first comes over and says, "Will you serve God?" And he goes, "Nope."
And everybody's like,
yeah, the way he says it is hilarious. It's just the most like off the cuff, just no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yep.
That scene with Jesse really calling out everybody was so good, and that's what I've been waiting for, because the comic pretty much it doesn't start with that, but it's almost the inciting incident of the story. So the first issue of the book kind of flips around chronologically, all within the span of like a day or a couple days. But the kind of the first big inciting incident is Jesse basically telling everybody that they suck and calling them out. It's way worse in the book. Like he goes down the line and like calls out certain individuals for like awful things they've done.
Right.
He pretty much like breaches the confidentiality like in front of a bunch of people. But it's a really good scene, and I think it's the Jesse that I expected in the series, the one who's a little bit angrier about everything. He's just fed up. He's out of patience. He's just angry and just doesn't understand why people can't just be good people. And like sinning is one thing, but like being habitually a sinner and just constantly being bad and not seeming to care about it is what just drives him. Is what drives him to do what he's doing. And so when the series started and he was not really like that, I was kind of like, well, this is different. He's a little softer.
Yeah.
But now he's kind of starting to get to that place where a little bit of that piss and vinegar is starting to bubble to the surface. And, and we did get a little bit in the first episode where he fights Donnie in the bar, and we got a little glimpse of that like angry guy in there. But I liked that scene. It didn't go where I was in my mind thinking it was going to go, but it was cool to see the kind of moments, the shades of Jesse like that, where he's just mad.
And I think we're going to see that shift happen even more so as he starts exploring the power that he has, as well as just finding that purpose that he thinks he has to, that he needs, what he's doing as preacher, being like filling that role. What does he have to do? And if like really being forceful and angry and like commanding people to do things and be a certain way is something we're going to see more of, I think, moving forward.
And how much is he just going to have to tell them? Like, how many times does he have to tell them, or does he have to command it? And Ken Cannon actually had a great point when he says, I can make you. And he says, that wouldn't be very Christian of you.
Right.
He's right.
Exactly.
It's really good. He's like, you can't just make people do whatever you want. Isn't that against your whole ideology? So that's it was an interesting, another part of that scene that was so great. But yeah, it's funny.
I mean, is it though? I mean, you kind of struggle with like fate versus free will at that point in a way. You know what I mean? So, people who tend to lean towards religion probably believe more in like a faithful thing and feel as though like the commanding is something that comes along with the job. Whereas those who follow free will don't, no matter what they do, they're going to do whatever the hell they want. And in this case, like if you're running into people that are only going to do whatever the hell they want, like, you kind of have to force them. You kind of have to be the driving. You got to push them in the right direction. And I think it's going to be difficult for Jesse to figure out how to push people in the right direction without them doing something wrong. Like I can't remember the character's name in the first episode, the guy who cuts out his heart.
Ted Ryerson.
Yeah, when that guy cuts out his heart and hands it to, I mean, obviously, like, the words Jesse used when he was talking to that guy didn't necessarily mean go and cut out your heart and hand it to your mom. Like, don't do that. But that's how he interpreted it. So he has to be very careful with how he words things from here on out. And I don't know if he realizes that yet.
Yeah, that's what we were saying in the last episode. I don't think he still really hasn't. There were two things still. Jesse hasn't seemed to remember the being that visited him, that gave him the power initially, and he doesn't seem to have made that connection necessarily. Or maybe he has and just internalizing it and working through it. I don't know.
I wonder if he'll just end up getting really drunk again and like having a flashback of some sort and like pulling in pieces of that night, you know?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if maybe it was just blocked and he couldn't recall it, or if whenever the two gentlemen finally catch up with him, if they'll be able to shed some light on it and jog his memory. I kind of think Jesse's plan might be, if he just makes Ken Cannon do it, then everyone else will follow suit.
Right.
Because he's a pillar of the community. I don't think Jesse would be down for commanding every single individual person to come to church, because what's the point of that?
Right.
Because then
but he's creating a leader so that people have someone to follow.
He thinks if he manipulates this one person into doing it, the rest will just follow by suit, and then he sees it as a means to an end type of thing. And we've already in the previous episode, I talked about how Donnie was starting to kind of seemed like he was kind of catching on to like that there was something off about the preacher.
Right.
And then did you watch the
little teaser for next episode?
Yeah, there's a little glimpse of Donnie basically confirming that.
Preacher's making people do things.
Yeah, there you go. Nailed it. So yeah, I think it was a pretty solid episode. I don't think it was
sure.
I don't think it was by any means my favorite.
I've found myself becoming more interested in the show with each episode. Like I kind of binged the first 3 and then I waited for 4 to air last night.
Gotcha.
And like the first one I was kind of like, it's okay. And the second one I was like, this is getting good. And third one was like, all right, I'm digging this. And then the fourth one I was like, okay, like I feel invested now.
Yeah.
So
totally. Yeah, it's the mythology is really starting to unroll in front of us. We're
For
really
sure.
starting to get a lay of the land and the characters and kind of how things are shaping up. So it's really exciting.
For sure. I'm pumped to see where it goes. And so Alex wants me to add in this section of questions we want to ask. I feel like we had a couple in this last 5 minute segment we just talked. But there's one question I want to throw out there, and it's something that I'm gonna have to go back and do. But the sign for the church, there's always red letters, and I want to compile a list of the red letters and see if that does anything. So that's one of my questions: is what do the red letters signify, if at all, if anything? I don't know.
That's cool.
I realized that every time they do a clip of that sign, there's a couple of letters are red.
And they didn't have one this episode, did they?
I think there was maybe one or two. I don't remember. It might have been in like one of the flashback scenes. But I'm gonna have to go back and start putting that together because I'm assuming they're gonna do that in every episode. And I think personally think like symbolism and stuff like that in literary works tends to be kind of garbage. I don't necessarily believe in it. I think English teachers make it up to make you think about stories more. But stuff like that, like these little letters and things that are like, they're not literary things. It's like a literal visual representation of something on screen. It's meant to mean something. Like those red letters are very stark in contrast to the very sepia tone, like background and colors. So I'm curious as to like what that might lead to in the future.
I hope it is something. That's cool. I had always just like probably most people who are watching the show just laughed at whatever dumb joke was on the sign and then going, that's good, and then moving on. But that is really cool. I hadn't even picked up on that.
Yeah, so that's my one question here.
Yeah, that and I my only really burning question is, when is Jesse gonna remember, or when are they gonna reveal what it is?
Right,
because I think
I think by the end of the season, there's only 2 or 3 more episodes left. I think
this was 4, but I think maybe 5 technically. This season's 10. I'm pretty sure.
Is it? I don't know. But I would assume by the end of the season, they kind of have to reveal what exactly is going on.
We have 6 more.
Okay. So
yeah, absolutely by the end of the season, but I kind of think we need it a little sooner than that.
They'll probably hit it like episode 7.
Yeah, we need. I think that's kind of the mystery that's going to crack a lot of stuff wide open. So I understand why it might be pushed towards the back of the season, but I really want some answers a little sooner on that front. So we'll see.
Right on. Cool. All right. Well, once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of the show. Share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. If you want to hear Nick and Alex talk about film and movies and other awesome stuff with a few of their other friends, be sure to check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com, which is also available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. And you can listen to me talk about video games with Alex and my friend Brian and some other guests that we have here and there on the Midwest Podcast Network, Midwest Game Nerds podcast. So check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. The theme music for Gone to Texas is the song All In by the band The Red Thread, and is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. So all that being said, Nick, any final thoughts?
No, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming on, and go forth and speak the good word.
Word.